Hey folks, welcome back to the Wyoming Old Iron page. And like I discussed in my introductory video, the first, probably 9 months to a year of this is primarily going to be me acting as my own contractor. So I wanted to give you some background so you know my experiences and you can relate them to your own. See if think you're qualified to do this or not. Again, I'm a semi-retired HVAC and appliance technician. I've been involved in the trades all my life. I worked in Washington State for most of my career, which required us to be licensed electricians to do those things. So I can do most of the mechanical, but again, I've been around construction all my life. My grandfather was involved in construction. My uncle is a retired contractor. And while I had never done a complete house when we purchased this property, I knew the basic steps. So in 2017, we bought this property in northeastern Wyoming. First thing we had to do was determine a building site for both the house and the barn. We knew going in that we would be building the barn first. That's something to consider. Where I come from in Washington State, you are not allowed to build the barn first. You must build a residence before you're allowed to build a shop. Now, there's a lot of shops there that have an upstairs apartment, but they have an upstairs apartment. And it must pass all building codes. You must have everything, it's like building a small apartment. So it depends on where you are. So after you choose a building site, you have to go get a set of plans drawn up or purchase a set of plans that you find that you like. You have to adapt those plans to your building site and your topography. And then you have to take those plans to your government agency in most cases and pull permits. Now here, this property had never been developed. So we had to pull a driveway permit in order to get an address. The address was necessary in order to get a well permit. Then we had to pull an electrical permit and a septic permit because there is a bathroom in the barn here. Those were all the permits we were required to pull here. Again, where I come from in Washington, you would be required to do environmental impact statements. You're only allowed to have 5,000 square feet of impervious surface on a lot. And the lot doesn't matter how big the lot is. It could be a quarter acre, or it could be 10 acres. But you're only allowed 5,000 square feet without having runoff studies and retention ponds and a lot of other things. Here, the barn's 3,200 square feet. The house will be 3,740 square feet of impervious surface. And then the driveway in Washington State would count. So these are all things you have to know to be your own contractor. What are your local codes? If you're going to do it, this is what things the contractor does. He's responsible for the permits. He's responsible for scheduling the excavating, the materials, getting the thing put together. He may not do any of the work himself, but he's responsible for coordinating everything and making sure it's done correctly. So once we had the driveway in, we had the building site leveled off. I made up the plumbing for the bathroom, but the excavation did not happen while we were here, which brings me to another point. I learned the hard way, never be your own contractor if you are not living here. We still lived in Washington when this barn was built. Even though I had drawn them detailed plans on where the plumbing was to go, it didn't get put in there. So we had to alter the bathroom. The floor in here, the concrete was poured when we weren't here. The floor in here is nothing short of atrocious. That's something else we learned, is there's only 3 concrete contractors in the area, and only one of them's any good, and he's booked almost a year in advance. So he did not do the floor in here. There are spots where there's 1 to 1.5 inch deep dips. The left-hand garage door, which is behind the white Dodge truck there, it slopes 1.25 inches down from right to left. So if you're not going to be able to be there, I strongly encourage you not to try to be your own contractor. We ran into all kinds of problems. So we then came in once the building site was leveled off, and that would have been the spring of 18. The concrete was supposed to be poured in June. It was an extremely wet year. It did not get poured until the end of August. That delayed our construction crew from coming in. They had been pushed back, and I wasn't here when this is a metal building. We purchased it, as a prefab, but you have to assemble it. Insulation, metal, girders, everything else. And when I made arrangements with a friend of mine here to take delivery of it, and he thought it was all here. Well, when I got the pictures of what he'd unloaded, the insulation pile didn't look correct at all. So he counted the number of rolls for me, and long story short is my insulation for this building ended up in Arizona, and Arizona's insulation ended up here. So it took about a month to get that straightened around, where they picked up my insulation there, picked up the Arizona people's insulation here, and swapped them. What I didn't know is we were missing 1 roll of roofing and 1 roll of wall insulation. So we come over here late September of 18, and we had been told that it would take the erectors 7 to 10 days to put this building up. They had been here 9 days when we got here, and the steel frame girders and roof trusses were not even completely finished. It had been extremely wet, and those guys just didn't feel like working. It ended up taking 22 days to assemble this thing. Fortunately, it was a bid job, so that helped. But my original plan was to come over, begin framing up the apartment that eventually will be my office, but that we're living in right now. We would get the power put into the building, and I would get those 2 garage doors put in. Those were not part of the package. And if you notice the dent on the right-hand garage door, that's from some dummy backing into it with his trailer, who shall remain me. So that's going to be replaced when we do the house. I'm going to have the garage doors done by a local guy, and I'm going to get him to replace that panel that's damaged. Anyway, as the erectors put up the walls, they came to me one day, and they said, we're short 1 roll of insulation. So I had to go take a flying around. The only place in the area that had it was Rapid City, South Dakota, which is about 100 miles one way. So I ran over to Rapid City, picked up a roll of insulation, came back, and they were all set, or so we thought. Well, you fast forward 4 days, they were then putting the roof on, and we found out we were, on a Friday, we were 1 roll of insulation short on the roof. This was at 2:30 in the afternoon. I had to run back to Rapid City to get the last roll of roofing insulation. It then took me 3 months and my first ever negative Yelp review to get the money back from the company I bought the building from. And I'm just trying to be honest with you so that you know what some of the challenges are you're going to face. And I've been in the trades, but I'm by no means am I a professional contractor. So at this point, the house is built. We need to come back over and finish framing the office, frame up the bathroom, get this place ready to live in. So coming over the next spring, I made arrangements with a lumberyard to bring over a large batch of lumber to frame up those interior walls, wiring, plumbing, just a whole bunch of stuff. I live on a 1.5 lane wide gravel country road. I had told them they couldn't come with a full semi, they needed to come with a box truck. They didn't listen. Not only did they come with a full semi, but they did not come with a forklift. And my forklift was not here at that time. In fact, I didn't even own it at that time. They show up, and the way this company unloads is they unhook the semi from the trailer, and the forks are on the back of the semi. He backs up to the trailer and unloads. Well, you're not going to back a semi up to a trailer on a 1.5 lane wide country road. So I ended up having to make 3 trips to the lumber yard in Gillette to pick up my materials and then come back and unload them. Gillette is 160 miles round trip. So just nothing went right. I didn't get as much done that trip as I thought I would, or the next trip. So in the meantime, I was still living in Washington. We lost our house in Washington to a house fire. And before you say, aw, it was fine. We all survived. We just lost stuff. It could have been a whole heck of a lot worse. If I can find some of the pictures, I will insert them on the video here just to show you. But we got out, our animals got out, and we were able to save some of the stuff. But the house was almost a complete loss. The only part of the house that survived was the downstairs framing and the foundation. Everything else had to be rebuilt. If everybody remembers, in 19, the building was starting to ramp back up again. So I ended up, I had friends in the industry. I knew people who did everything. The only person I did not know personally was an insulator. Everybody else I knew who did work on my house. I called in every favor I ever had and fixed a lot of appliances for free. And we got the house rebuilt in 11 months. That required a brand new set of blueprints, getting those blueprints approved at the county, who lost them for a month behind somebody's desk. And it literally took me harassing them to get them to find the submitted plans. Then I did all of my own electrical, plumbing, HVAC, but I had to get bids on those things from other companies. The reason being is I could pay myself and we could use that to upgrade the house, which we knew we were going to sell. So I acted as my own contractor in that case. Pretty much everything came off without a hitch because one of the guys doing the work for me was also a contractor. And he is the gentleman who's going to drive out here and frame this house for me. Great guy. And he helped me a lot. But we would have gotten it done without his help, but we got it done. So in the meantime, I still have this over here. We ended up taking 4 semi-loads to get everything over here. And if you remember what happened in February of 20, COVID hit. We couldn't sell a lot of the stuff we were planning to sell. We still had construction work to do here. Wyoming was locked down until May the 5th of 2020. If you came over, you couldn't do anything for 2 weeks. All the restaurants were closed. Not that there's many here, but there was nothing you could do. So we came over I think it was May 14th of 2020, and I spent 2 weeks working on this place. We brought a load over. And then we came back that fall and worked on it, brought our travel trailer over and dropped it off. And then came back with we'd shipped a load of my old iron over here on a 53-foot flatbed trailer. And my friend unloaded that for me here. And then we came on June the 8th with the last load. At this point, the power had been hooked up, the well had been drilled, water had been hooked up, septic was done, but the septic didn't work. That's another story. Ended up having to get the contractor back on the septic, or the installer, and have him rerun the leach field, and it's worked fine ever since. And then we had to get the house foundation poured. That had been scheduled, so we got that done. I had to put the plumbing in under the slab so that it was ready to go. And the electrical, when I had it put in, it was put in as a 320 amp service. And off of that, you can take two 200 amp services, one to the barn, one to the house. The theory being you're never going to be running full tilt on both services at the same time. You're not going to overload that main service. And I probably never would be able to anyway, because I don't think the house is going to be even close to needing 200 amps. But that's where we ended up when we got here. I had to finish enclosing the office. It had not been insulated or sided yet. My grandson came over with me for 2 weeks and helped. The bathroom had been drywalled. It had not been sided, or it had been insulated. And the plumbing fixtures had been partially put in, but not completely. The pressure tank for the well was in, and things like that. The water heater, the toilet, the sink, the washer and dryer hookups were in. The washer and dryer were not, although they were here. So those are all the things you have to know, and this is just to get to this point. So I have to shoot a part 2 where I'll talk about the house, and I'll probably repeat some of this there, because there's so much I'm trying to catch up on. For those of you who tuned in due to the title of this channel, I will give you a hint. 3 days before I moved from Washington, I got a hint on a very rare engine. And I will be going, and it's been stored at my friend's house in Green Bay, Wisconsin since August of last year, when it was delivered to them. We'll be going the first full week of April over to pick that engine up. If the guy was honest with me, I should be able to take a coil and a battery, some gas and some oil, and get that engine running. So I will intersperse that in that video of us getting there, looking at it, loading it. I'm going to keep what it is under wraps until I get there. But it is a fairly rare engine you don't see real often. With that, I'm going to sign off on this video, and we'll get the one at the house shot. And then in the next couple days, we're supposed to be getting delivery of a wheelchair lift and our first batch of lumber, although the beams and the I-joists and the headers have all been delivered. Those came from a different location. And we'll talk about some of the trials and tribulations of getting materials during COVID, and how planning has probably saved me $100,000 so far by being ready to go and having a place to store the stuff when it got here. So on that note, I want you all to have a good day, and I'll try to keep these as short and informative, and I'll see you when the stuff starts getting delivered. Thank you.